So today we have heard a lot about appreciative inquiry, and it's been mentioned by Tilia, by Orlando. It's a tool and a mindset that's sometimes used in organisational development, and it reframes change as growth. Next slide, please, Tilia. So for me, this oak sapling represents potential in individuals, in teams, in organisations. It also represents a question: what conditions will enable this sapling to thrive? And I think this is an analogy of appreciative inquiry. Because at its heart, appreciative inquiry is actually about what gives life. And it assumes that in every organisation there are things that work, strengths that can be built on. And that as we focus on those strengths, achievements, the things that we really value and aspire to, and as we talk about them particularly, then it generates energy, enthusiasm, and creativity. We create an environment where we can thrive. Because life comes from the meaning that we find in our work, and particularly when our values and the values of our team are aligned. The change in appreciative inquiry is collaborative. Actually, this probably should have been termed grassroots change, this session, because the change is rooted in the experience of all the stakeholders and what's important and meaningful to them. Change is ideally about becoming the best that we can be. So in this session, sorry, next slide, Tilia, please. Matt and I are going to share our experiences of using appreciative inquiry to give you some ideas of how it can be used in health and social care as a tool for change. We're not going to do the theory of appreciative inquiry or give you a step-by-step lesson, because you can easily find that, but we want to tell you what it was like doing appreciative inquiry in real-life situations. So if you could stop sharing your screen, Tilia, and Matt, would you like to start?
Okay, yep. Thank you, Rachel. So my name is Matthew Simpson. I'm going to tell you about my research carried out as part of a PhD, but motivated by my practice experience and my desire to support and enhance the team that I worked with. So I'm what's called an approved mental health professional, or an AMP for short, and our role is concerned with the operation of the Mental Health Act, including the competing requirements to prevent detention under the Mental Health Act, while at the same time being the decision maker about detention if we consider this is required. I was a local authority AMP service lead, and I wanted to research how AMPs respond to referrals for detention. I wanted to find out more about this area of practice, and I wanted to achieve some tangible outcomes for the service I worked in. Making decisions about whether or not someone should be detained in a psychiatric hospital against their wishes does not sit comfortably with anyone. So embarking on this research, I was aware that professionals may struggle to speak openly about this area of their practice, fearing criticism. This is the reason I was attracted to the positive focus of appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry is about learning from best practice. It's about generating positive conversations about what works. This is very different to problem-oriented conversations that focus on barriers and what went wrong. Such negative conversations have become the staple of public services to the extent that we're not used to talking about what we do well. Appreciative inquiry is a change process with a difference. The changes sought are defined by practitioners and seek to emphasize their best practice. In this way, there's a natural motivation for this change, this development. It's not imposed, it arises from practice. In appreciative inquiry, positive conversations are used to create a reality of best practice. So meaning is created between the participants collaboratively. and so a sense of ownership is generated for the participants about what is discovered and what changes might help the service. So the stages of appreciative inquiry, most commonly the 4D cycle, seek to discover the best, dream of an ideal future and the steps that might help to get there, design the service to achieve those goals, and then implement them through the destiny stage. My study into approved mental health professional decision making at the point of referral for detention got 9 AMPs together for 4 one-day group workshops working through the 4D cycle. The first 2 days were face-to-face in 2020 between the first and second lockdowns, and we valued the chance to connect with each other at this difficult time. During the discovery phase, we sought to understand our best practice through conversation. Appreciative inquiry is founded upon the meaning we generate in conversation with each other. This experience was validating because we created a shared understanding about this complexity of this area of practice. The conversations helped us to drill down on what it was about our practice we really valued. This clarified issues in another otherwise murky area of practice. The experience was also uplifting and motivating, allowing us to recognize our strengths and value our contribution. We were not being questioned or criticized, we were celebrating our achievements. Crucially, we began to understand through our best experiences how we had overcome the barriers in practice we so often faced. We didn't shy away from these problems, rather we accepted them as part of the reality of our practice, but focused on the aspects of our practice within our control. We depicted our best practice artistically, drawing a complex picture that emphasized our desire to connect with the people referred and understand their lives holistically. Our focus was on the times we actively sought to prevent detention, connecting with people and their families, creating a shared understanding with them, and exploring all avenues before concluding detention might be required. We work in a pressurized system where expedience has become a priority. Our decision-making has become compromised by this. Detaining someone under the Mental Health Act is a significant decision, and AMPs have always held this option as a last resort. 2 doctors are required within the assessment process if detention is sought, but prevention work can take place before their involvement. When under pressure, we tend to carry out our assessments with doctors as a one-off, highly stressful event for the person referred, relying on prevention work carried out by other services and denying ourselves an opportunity to actively contribute to this. Research into Mental Health Act assessments suggests those subject to the assessment don't feel listened to in this process when assessments are carried out in this way. Concerns about risk, such as the harm a person might cause to themselves or someone else, can sometimes dominate our attention, clouded by anxiety from the referrer and transferred to the AMP through the passing of responsibility for decision making. We recognised anxiety can lead to reactive decisions and adopted an analytical approach to help us identify the urgency within a situation. Is a reactive response required to resolve this immediately, or can I work more collaboratively with this person? We use the metaphor changing gears and buying time as a way to encompass our desire to slow down and take a more considered approach. In our appreciative inquiry, we valued meeting the person first, trying to work collaboratively and transparently with them to prevent the need for detention. We gave ourselves permission to do this work and created a triage role in our duty system to enable this to happen. We promoted collaboration with other services towards seeking less restrictive alternatives to detention through rapidly organised online meetings. We gently shifted the focus from detention to prevention through some minor changes to the way we approached our practice, Recognising these were the aspects of our practice we valued most. We found none of this took more time because we had successes that saved time. Overall, we learned from our best practice and created an environment at work that enabled us to practice in this way more of the time. Prior to this study, I had gathered the team together to talk about how we made decisions about referrals for detention. The focus of that conversation became all the barriers we faced in our practice, and the result was that we were all left feeling deflated. In this appreciative inquiry, we achieved so much more. The positive narrative opened doors to us that were otherwise hidden. We were able to recognise what we wanted to achieve and then make that more possible within the service. We used our strengths to overcome barriers. Through implementing this approach, we became more successful at preventing detention, bringing us closer to our values and achieving the aims of our role. Appreciative inquiry is based on a belief that if you focus on positive things, you will have positive outcomes. This was our experience. Rachel, what was your experience of using appreciative inquiry?
Well, so the appreciative inquiry, it was my first job with Bournemouth University and the first time I'd used appreciative inquiry. So I was quite nervous. The study was in a very different setting. It was in a maternity unit in the first year of COVID. So staff were obviously struggling with the uncertainty, the changes to their practice, and staff shortages because of sickness. So the research was about well-being, staff well-being. I wanted to understand how to support staff and were there things that could be done to help them stay well and enhance their well-being. I decided to use appreciative inquiry because I had a short period of orientation in the unit. Although I'm a midwife, I hadn't worked in the NHS for several decades. And I was so impressed. It was like staff were giving 120% to their job. I'm not a mathematician. But I also saw how quickly they were crushed. You know, if there was one thing that wasn't documented, or if they couldn't give care to the standard that they really wanted to, then that was really tough for them, and they felt it. They felt a sense of personal failure. And I realized that traditional research, you know, you look for problems, you identify things that are wrong, areas of weakness, and then you come up with recommendations. But I suddenly felt uncomfortable with this approach. I'd heard about appreciative inquiry and I thought maybe this would be a more appropriate approach if I really wanted to help staff well-being. So I decided I was going to look at things that made a difference and discover what was it that kept people coming back day after day, what inspired them and kept them going. And were there really any things that could be done by managers, by colleagues, to help them thrive? Or was it simply an injection of cash and, you know, 25% more staff that were needed? So what did I do? I interviewed about 40 staff, a broad range, everyone from midwives, care assistants, student midwives, doctors, both junior and senior staff. And I asked them about a good day or an experience that stood out and what they really valued about it, why it was so meaningful, the things that helped them stay well. And then we explored their dreams for the future, imagining how things could be. So I decided to use appreciative inquiry before the pandemic, and by the time the study started, it was after the first lockdown, and I was really nervous at that point, thinking, can I actually ask staff about their best experiences and what gives them a buzz? But I was really amazed at the reaction. So staff shared the most amazing stories, personal stories, reflections about days that stood out. They talked about their love of their job and the reasons they decided to be a doctor, a care assistant, a midwife. And I absolutely love listening to people's stories. I think it's such a privilege. And although I'd worked as a midwife for many years, I was still stunned by their passion, their enthusiasm, even in the middle of COVID. So, what outcomes were there? Actually, to begin with, the interviews were therapeutic, and I wasn't really expecting that. But I think it gave them a space for reflection. Again, there was no criticism, no looking for failure, but it was a time for them to actually stand back and think about what they did, what mattered to them. Some of them told me stories about why they decided to go into their profession, and we talked about things they were proud of. And actually remembering those achievements, that builds resilience in itself. And I could see that in people. So I'm not a coach, I'm not a counsellor, but people were coming out of the interviews saying, I feel like I've had therapy, and encouraging other staff to sign up for interviews. Some staff cried as they talked about their struggles with professional confidence, traumas at home. So it wasn't just about rose-coloured spectacles, but we then went on and we talked about maybe the determination and the amazing commitment that people were showing simply by coming back to work despite the challenges. And we looked at, well, how would you have liked it to be in an ideal world? So in the middle of COVID, I saw these interviews by themselves were making a difference to staff well-being. The second thing was that staff actually were realising things about themselves which they hadn't seen before. So there was one midwife, and after the interview, she contacted me a few days later, I think, and said, I've thought about the things we chatted about, and actually I realise I'm really passionate about this one area of midwifery, and I've been to see my line manager because I'd like to specialise in that. Another had had a difficult experience. She'd come from another service. She really struggled to fit into the team. She said, I just feel like I'm invisible. And again, we talked about how would you like it to be in an ideal world. We talked about the previous service she'd worked in and the really good things. And again, she contacted me and said, I've thought about the things we spoke about, and I realise actually I don't have to be a victim in this. I can be that change. The things that I really want and the things that I wished had been here, I can actually do that. So there were quite a few staff who had those sort of experiences because of the space of reflection. It also strengthened connections between staff. So I did some group interviews. They were difficult in COVID. You can imagine just staffing the ward some days was like a major miracle, let alone finding 3, 4, 5 people who didn't have anything to do and could come and chat to me. So I just took any time I could. It might have been 30 minutes before the lunch trolley arrived. I once found a room with some doctors in who had some time. So I just learned to seize any opportunity there was and start a conversation. Mostly I threw out a question and then let staff talk to each other. And the thing I realised was these were conversations they'd never had before. They might have worked together for years, but they suddenly started to realise they had things in common. A student midwife asked a senior midwife, oh, so do you have trouble switching off sometimes? And what strategies do you have? What do you do? They remembered things they used to do. The doctors said, oh, we used to get together at lunchtime once a month, and maybe it would be good if we started doing that again. So it was amazing to see those conversations going on. And appreciative inquiry isn't just about going through that 4D cycle. It is much more organic than that, much more dynamic. It's about changing focus, changing conversations, because what we focus on grows. So I tried to keep the conversations going. I put posts on social media, little videos with feedback, and invited people to join in and to share their stories. I did feedback to clinical governance and all sorts of meetings. And so we ended up with a big list of things that people acknowledged really made a difference to their day and to their, So also there were insights for managers. They were super interested in what we'd done and the discussions. And one thing that came out was the staff room. People really wanted somewhere nice they could go, whether they had 5 minutes or half an hour break. And so some money was spent to refurbish the staff room. Some of the staff got involved. And that was really useful for the ongoing well-being of staff. Of course, there were formal results and some have been published, but what was exciting to me was the immediate impact to the maternity service, to a team that I'd come to respect and to care about. So my first experience of appreciative inquiry astounded me. Although it was far from perfect and it was done in a challenging time, it had an immediate impact. It strengthened relationships. It changed the conversations, gave some insights, ideas, even changes in career direction. And hopefully, I felt like maybe I'd made a contribution to the ongoing well-being of staff. So I'd like to just summarise our experiences of appreciative inquiry. Tilia, please could we have the last few slides? Thank you. The next one, lovely. So appreciative inquiry, I think both Matt and I agree. We've talked a lot from even when we did the inquiries. It holds exciting potential for change in health and social care, and change that's meaningful, that includes everyone, their ideas, their enthusiasm, and it allows individuals and teams to build on the best, the things that really matter to them. It's got a strong theoretical base. It draws on positive psychology and neuroscience that shows us different areas of our brain are activated when we focus on our achievements, the things that are of meaning to us, our aspirations and dreams. That's a different part of our brain than when we're focused on fixing problems, although both are really important. So it does reach other parts because it connects with that value and that creativity. Staff in both of our studies went back to their roots. Why am I doing this? What did I really hope to achieve when I came into this? And they saw ways to practice that were even more coherent with those values. It's really versatile. It can be used for formal intervention and research, which was a little bit more what we did, although mine was a bit ad hoc because I was working with staff who were in clinical practice at the time. It can be used for a whole organisation or a team. It can be used on a one-to-one basis. And it can be used simply by having an appreciative inquiry mindset in a team meeting, throwing out a question that is very different and looks at the best, the things that are going well. The next slide, please, Tilia. So simply asking an appreciative inquiry type question can start the process of change because it turns people's attention in an unexpected direction, and it helps them to focus on the things that they value and want to invest their energy in. So to conclude, Matt and I found meaning. We found things that gave life to staff in social care and in the NHS, even in the pandemic. There was enthusiasm, pride, dreams and aspirations. And the staff talked about the things that meant the most to them. They seemed inspired and energized to build on the best and to be the best that they could be. We think it was remarkable. We think that they are remarkable. And the thing that enabled that to happen was appreciative inquiry. Next slide, Tilia, please. So thank you for listening. We've put a few resources together. I think Tilia's going to send around the slides, but if not, then do contact us and we can send them to you. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to contact us. Thank you. I'm going to hand back to you, Tilia.
Thank you so much, Rachel and Matt, for sharing your experiences there.